How's it going, SILKSONGers, my insane fans? My name is Primacon, and the only reason I look like a wet raccoon is because I just got out of the shower, not because I'm a greasy goober SILKSONG fanatic like those people on the subreddit. Ugh. Speaking of the subreddit, I've been dwelling on there, which is what I do, crawling and creeping in the pits of hell to extract the most insane and crazy theories people have why SILKSONG is still not out or why Team Cherry is still not communicating. And I wanted to talk about those theories, but I was like, what better way to do that than to make an actual goddamn tier list where I rank your stupid takes on why SILKSONG is still not out. I just picked the most common one I've noticed on Reddit over the past month or so, but I'm sure there's some reasons here that I missed, so I'm gonna do something fun. If you don't see your take in this video and you leave it down in the comments below of why you think SILKSONG is still not out, I will give it a rating by replying to your comment. The tier list is pretty simple. There is no S tier because at the end of the day, S tier would be concrete evidence. None of us know why. There's only theories and speculations. Some are just more brain rotted than the other. So we have the top tier, A tier, which is most likely. Then we got could be a factor, you know, could be, couldn't be, sounds good, sounds nice, maybe not. That's B tier right there. Then C tier is probably not, maybe like, you know, I disagree with your theory. It's probably not the stupidest thing I've heard, but I highly disagree with it, so it's a C tier, you know? Good theory probably doesn't apply. There's no D tier because it will be really hard to distinguish that from the bottom tier, which is the Reddit brain rot F tier, which is absolutely diabolical shit that people genuinely believe. That goes there. Before we jump into the tier list, a really quick word from Papa Primacon regarding today's video sponsor, Instant Gaming. There's some really banger video game deals going on right now, and I want to highlight a couple of my favorites. Some new games came out like Life is Strange Double Exposure and Black Ops 6, which I've been playing a lot, by the way. It's a lot of fun. Haven't had fun in a Call of Duty game in a while. Both of which you can get at a pretty good discount, about 22% off. Of course, I'm not gonna forget my indie fans. You can get The Escapists 2, which is a sequel to the game I recently played on the channel, for just $3. It's literally 85% off. What a deal. And also Subnautica, the banger, is 30% off as well. Some video game keys like Human Fall Flat are as cheap as about $1. And this is completely authentic, they're trusted, and they only sell you authorized keys. In fact, you can get the Instant Gaming extension for all your different marketplaces like Steam, so it'll display the Steam price and also right above it the price at Instant Gaming. And it's also a really good way to browse video game deals which doesn't require you hopping from marketplace to marketplace. So I really think you should get this extension. That, and you can get yourself all the other video games by clicking the link down in the description. Thank you so much for Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. Back to the tier list. I'm gonna start us strong with probably the most popular theory we have going on. Is the big boy in red, Nintendo. Some people literally believe, and I'm not joking, I am not joking, some people seriously believe that the reason they're not communicating about SILKSONG is because they have signed an NDA with Nintendo because they want to release SILKSONG as a launch title for the Switch 2. That's right, fuck Mario, fuck Zelda, nobody gives a shit about that game. Fuck all the other first-party IPs that are actual console sellers. We're just gonna pretend Pokemon doesn't exist and Nintendo is a small company who requires indie games to take the forefront of selling their new console. This take is usually common among those people who are very limited in their sphere of gaming, who just live and breathe SILKSONG cope, and they don't really understand the wider scope of gaming outside their favorite game. So they think that SILKSONG is just this behemoth, biggest thing in the world, no other video game can top it, and it's probably so big that Nintendo of all people are reaching out to a small indie company and making them sign NDAs so that they can have the first hand at releasing the game on the Switch 2 as a launch title. It is so bizarre just even saying it out loud. And of course, we're just gonna pretend that the Xbox deal doesn't exist, right? SILKSONG is definitely not coming day one on Xbox Game Pass. I don't know since when Nintendo or Xbox or any other video game company became like a publisher for Team Cherry. They are an indie company, independent. The whole point is no other publisher or company controls or have a say in what they do. Anytime I see someone try to make an argument for why SILKSONG is being delayed as a launch title for Switch 2, I literally lose a couple of brain cells. I go into an aneurysm, and for that, I am throwing this bitch right in the F tier Reddit brain rot garbage take. Fuck you, fight me. Next up is something regarding communication, which is that Team Cherry just lost their password to their Twitter account. That's why they don't respond to anyone. Even for people congratulating them for winning the most anticipated game award, they just ignore it. They ignore everything, and the reason being, They lost the password to Twitter. You know what? You're goddamn right. If only Leth would tell them how to reset the password, but it's my personal theory that Leth just likes the chaos, so he will never let them know the arcane technology of resetting a password. Moving on. This next one is a pretty big and serious one too, which is Unity is something that delayed Hollow Knight SILKSONG. If you guys don't know, Unity had a weird fiasco last year where basically they were gonna introduce a rule that they're gonna charge developers a small percentage fee every time their game gets installed. The reason that was a big controversy is because a lot of times you can just delete the game and then install it again, but every time you install the game again, they will charge the developers even though you just paid for the game once. It doesn't take a messiah to understand why that's a stupid shitty thing to do, especially to smaller indie developers, and a lot of indie developers use Unity to make their games. Unity is probably one of the most common and popular game engines out there. Team Cherry is using it, people like Mark Brown are using it for their video game like Mind Over Magnet. I could go on. Unity has been a backbone for a lot of indie devs, for a lot of AAA devs, and of course when Unity announced that, it didn't go well and they had to retract that statement. But before they were able to do that, a lot of video games, especially indie ones, made the decision to publicly switch from Unity. They announced that they were not going to be making on Unity again, and they're going to be starting over from scratch on a different game engine. Rightfully so, because why the fuck would you want to lose all your livelihood to Unity? And the only reason they even made that change apparently because there was an ex-CEO of EA, the greediest bastard company out there in the video game market, and that guy was in charge of Unity at the time. I don't know if he still is or not, and he's the one who implemented that stupid change. I'm sure it's the same guy who once suggested that Call of Duty or other video games should charge people per reload. Yeah, you can see where that's coming from. Bringing it back to SILKSONG though, a lot of people speculate that because of that, Team Cherry switched off from Unity. And the biggest contender people bring out is this other game engine called Godot. While it's a very smart speculation on why the SILKSONG game is probably taking longer than it needed to be, personally it has never made too much sense to me because Unity is still plastered all over SILKSONG's website, and the websites get updated every single year for copyright. In fact, this is such a big thing that if they were not using Unity, why would they be promoting it? And I'm sure that will result in a lot of legal troubles as well. Plus the fact that Hollow Knight itself is built upon Unity and SILKSONG was very late into development, I don't think Team Cherry of all people would take such a drastic step so fast and just can their entire development cycle, especially now that that change has been taken back. I'm going to rate the Unity change as a could be a factor, B tier, as in could be a factor for a little delay. Maybe when the whole thing was happening, they slowed the development down to see how things play out, and then at the end of the day decided to continue with Unity anyway. We don't know that, this is just speculation, but I'm sure it had some little factor in delaying the game a little bit, at least. However, I do not think that they switch game engines. Next up is scope creep. This is one of the most smartest argument I have ever heard from a SILKSONG fan. People who make this argument are playing 5D chess, while the SILKSONG subreddit is stuck in underwater checkers. That's how the saying goes, right? People who make this argument have properly studied the way Team Cherry works. I cannot comprehend the amount of interviews in which Ari Gibson and William Pellin have went on record talking about how they make video games. They call it a controlled scope creep, where they basically keep adding features in layers like an onion on top of the game, where every new idea gives birth to more new ideas. But they always have a finished product, so at any time, like with Hollow Knight when they ran out of money, they could stop their development, polish what they have, wrap it up, and ship it out. That's their words. In fact, this is something Leth talked about in the interview he did with Blue SR, where he said that every time he calls Team Cherry, they're always talking about how another crazy idea we have, another brand new thing they're working on, and then Leth would be like, yeah, that sounds cool, but what about the 5 other things you guys told me about on the last phone call? Are we still doing that? Are we not doing that? Leth talked about how they struggle with scope creep as well. At the end of the day, they're very passionate about Hollow Knight SILKSONG. They're so passionate about Hollow Knight as well. Most of you guys don't know this, but they had to can half of Deepness. The reason Deepness feels so empty and doesn't have a final boss for the Dreamer Hera is because they ran out of the time for development. They talked about that in an interview they did with a magazine. It's a magazine called A Profound Waste of Time, in which they did a segment and they talked about their development. They also mentioned how they stopped the Forest of Bones area because they ran out of time and they wanted to ship Hollow Knight out. That's how they work, in a scope creep controlled manner. And I'm sure that's one of the most probable reasons for why they keep missing their quote-unquote deadline. they have a scope in mind, they predict a deadline for it, then the scope increases tenfold, so they're like, well, we probably can't meet that deadline anymore, and they just keep developing the game that way. Since they have pretty much an infinite amount of money, don't forget, they have enough sales from Hollow Knight to retire for a lifetime. They just keep adding on shit. I think this is probably one of the most likely causes for SILKSONG delay, and it's going top of my A tier. Very smart, very big brain. Oh god, the next one is a bit tough to tackle. It is called starting over. And no, not starting over because of Unity or any kind of reason at all, but there's a sect in subreddit, a religious cult that believes that they just lost the code. 99.9% people who say that say it as a joke, including me, but there is some people out there, I don't know where they come from, who just think that SILKSONG thinks something completely horrible happened and they had to start over. I've seen this argument in replies. People have died on this hill talking about how, and they can never give a reason. You ask them, you're like, why do you think they started over? They're like, oh, well, I don't know, but they probably had to, and that's why they can't talk about it because it would be really embarrassing to admit. I mean, like, what would they even say, right? They just had to start over. I don't even want to spend too much time talking about why this is stupid. This is going bottom of Reddit brain rot F tier. This has Reddit brain rot written all over it. Although for the people who say this is a joke, it obviously belongs in the A tier. But for people who are serious about it, get out of here. Go sit down. Think about what you did. Ah, yes, the next up, the classic divorce. People who believe they People who believe they had a falling out. Oh no, Team Cherry. Scandalous news. They had a fallout. Ari Gibson, William Pellin, not in a marriage anymore. Some people think that they have internal problems, struggling with relations internally, and that's why they have a problem and not developing SILKSONG. Instead, they're fighting with each other. Hey, this is a classic case of trying to find any kind of explanation and reasoning for when you don't have any and you can't really think of anything logical for why the game isn't coming out. Your brain just tries to fill in the blanks. This is like human version of AI generated reasons. Do I even have to say anything about it? Like, it's so silly. It's just fun to laugh at it. You're totally gonna forget about all the conventions these guys go to all the time. So far as like going to PAX Australia just this month. This is another one of those arguments I've seen thrown around every time people are disappointed after a showcase. You know, after a showcase, how the Discord server, the Twitter, the subreddit all goes into a fucking chaos spiral. Everything goes out of control. There's wildfires everywhere. You gotta call the police. This is one of those takes that pops up then, where people are so riled up in emotions that they would just spit out anything. Unfortunately, as much as I love this take, this is going in the brain rot section. We're being absolutely brain rotted. Now, does it go above or below the... You know what? I'm gonna put it above the start over reason, because at least they try to justify it as in like a reason for why SILKSONG isn't out. Whereas the start over theory is just so... It lacks any kind of footing. This thing is fucking flying on thin air. Ah yes, the cancelled theory. Mwah. Beautiful. Another one of those takes that usually pops up after a disappointing showcase, but it's also not very uncommon to see it around every now and then. Sometimes you'd see those posts go up on like Twitter or Reddit or Discord. Some people would be like, so when will we finally agree to the fact that they actually canceled SILKSONG and they just don't want to tell us because they probably just don't want to admit that they canceled the game. This argument is usually paired up with brain rot things like having a falling over. They say that, oh, they had a fallout and that's why they canceled the game. They disbanded like the fucking Beatles, and then Leth is left to do damage control and he's just not telling us. I like this theory because it's like a little children's fairy tale folklore you would dream up. Like if I ask my future kids what they think about like Christmas, it's like they're Santa Claus. There's just something so heartfelt about it. It's just like, it's so deep in the depths of depression. There's no arguing. There's no more trying to give bullshit reasons like starting over. It's just kind of like acceptance, you know? Like, it's just gone. It's just not happening. It's what it is. As much as I would love to put this in the Reddit brain rot thing, I just can't help but put in the probably not. Because I feel like people who say it's cancelled are so far gone. I don't want to be mean to them. And I want to be gentle about it. You know, just pat them on the shoulder a little bit to be like, it's okay, little Timmy. It's probably not cancelled. Don't worry about it. These things just take time. You know what I mean? It's just too goddamn cute, man. It's going in the C tier. Ah, yes, the keen-eyed amongst you must be wondering what the fuck this is. Well, this is the passion project argument. Ideally, I wanted to put it in A tier as well, and let me explain why I decoupled it, because because this was originally just part of the scope creep idea, but the intention behind this point is different. This point is more about the fact that Hollow Knight was always a passion project for Team Cherry, right? Well, yes and no, because, well, YouTube, I do it, is a passion project for me, or a lot of people who make video games are a passion project for them. But at the same time, what more can you want than having a career in your passion? You could be passionate about something but also treat it like a career. Isn't that the dream at the end of the day, doing what you want to do and being able to be successful in it? Yes, they got a big break with Hollow Knight, and yes, they're developing SILKSONG with a lot of passion, allowing themselves all the time in the world they need because they don't have constraints anymore, like running out of money and having to survive off like one croissant a day. That also doesn't mean that they're oblivious to the fact that people also want SILKSONG, and they probably want to put the game out as soon as possible too. Although the only difference being they have the luxury now to take the time they think they need. That's why I'm putting SILKSONG being a passion project in could be a factor tier. I'll put it on top of it because I genuinely believe that this being a passion project and having them the money to make it as good as possible is a factor, but I feel like it's an indirect factor, a factor that's fueling the actual scope creep problem that they're dealing with. So I feel like these two go hand in hand, but one less than the other. Does that make sense? Scope creep is the byproduct of this being a passion project, and scope creep is the main reason SILKSONG isn't coming out. And the reason the scope creep exists is because they're passionate about SILKSONG. But passion doesn't mean stupidity. Passion still means that it's their career, so they are aware of the fact that the game does need to come out. It's just the leeway they give themselves is much larger than what we allow them to do. They probably think that 7-8 years of development time is fine, but for the fans, that's pretty much hell. But that doesn't mean that they'll let it take 20 years, for example, just because it's a passion project. Next up is one of my favorite goddamn points, which is that SILKSONG isn't real. It never existed. It was just a social experiment to see how far the human psyche can go. A cruel ploy put in place by Let and gang. It's like the Russian sleep experiment, but for Reddit gamers. How far can the human brain actually take it before cracking? So they give us little crumbs of a mysterious game called SILKSONG, which never existed in the first place. Oh, sometimes they had to take drastic steps like making a demo playable so people believe in it. But then they sat down in their chairs and watched the chaos unfold. And Mossbag, that bastard, he's in on it. Why do you think we don't hear from Mossbag anymore either? Team Cherry, shut him up. For takes like this, there deserves to be a new tier. This is going to be the Giga Chad triple S tier. There we go. There we go. Hell yeah. You know what? The Twitter argument can go there as well as the Silk Sanity argument. Yep. People who believe in these are just on another level. And last but not the least, porting. Porting is a point people bring up a lot. It's a point I have brought up a lot too, which is that Hollow Knight and SILKSONG by extension are such complex Metroidvania games. Hollow Knight itself launched with a lot of bugs, and it took a lot of time for Team Cherry to patch it out, smooth it over, before people really took wind of what this game is. They will not have that luxury with SILKSONG. If SILKSONG launches with a lot of issues, it will be a disaster, a PR nightmare. Every news outlet will be talking only about the fact that Team Cherry took so long to release SILKSONG, and they released a buggy, unfinished mess. That's the last thing the team wants, and to add on top of the fact that they're releasing it on every console at the same time. Hollow Knight took step-by-step process. It launched on Steam, then it launched on the Switch, then it launched on the consoles, and each step along the way they had to make the game workable on the intended platform. I'm sure porting it to new platforms introduces all new kinds of bugs in the game, and they have to patch all of that out. They took help from external studios to help it port to Switch. So much goes into porting. And now SILKSONG itself is going to be a much bigger game than Hollow Knight, and it's going to launch on every single platform at the same time, and they can't afford to make it at all glitchy and non-functional on any of those platforms. We don't even know if they're taking help of external studios or not. Some people think they are, some people think they're just doing it all in-house. Whatever it is, we know porting for sure is a very important factor in terms of the amount of time SILKSONG is taking to come out. I guarantee you, if SILKSONG was just promised to launch on Steam, on PC for starters, and then get a console release later, the game would be out much sooner than it is now in this timeline. People like the developers of Stardew Valley have also confirmed this before, that just releasing updates on console take a lot of time. That's why updates for Stardew come on PC first and then go to console second. Console is a complicated mess. So porting Hollow Knight Silksong to different consoles, ironing out all the bugs and glitches, assuming that they're finished adding the fucking, ideas and their scope creep is done for, that's a big assumption right there, after all of that. So porting is a very strong reason, and I'll put it in most likely as well. I will put it below scope creep because this comes after scope creep. You have to assume that they're done adding content to the game. And I was very sure of that at the start of this year, but I was like, there's no fucking shot they're still adding content to the game. But I'm not that sure anymore. After I've done so much research and read so many of their interviews and blogs and just watched so many videos of like Team Cherry and Let talk about how they work, I'm not 100% certain that they're done adding content to their game. So I'll put porting number 2. Actually, one more thing. There we go. Reason for not communicating: crazy, savage, hungry Silksong fans. I genuinely believe that this community is one of the most toxic communities out there when it comes to the vocal minority. Not all of us. Of course, you, me, people of reason, most of us are normal. But have you been to the subreddit, man? I'm sure the reason they don't even want to talk about the game and give any updates anymore is because people will eat them alive if they don't talk about release date. And I know you might say, no, I won't do that. I'm a nice little dude, I'm a good fucking Boy Scout. You and me might be, but a lot of people are not. People are vicious on the internet. When Hotline Miami 2 came out, people gave the developers death threats because it didn't live up to their expectations. I'm sure they don't want to deal with that, man. They just want to focus on their game. And now that the scope creep has gotten so out of hand, they probably are just like, you know what? There's not much we can say to please these fucking starved ass Redditors, so we're just not gonna say anything. I feel like that's very valid. I commend them for that, actually. I'm gonna put this in could be a factor. I'm gonna put this in top of could be a factor, provided they're not communicating. And that concludes the tier list. There we go, the final product. This is where you can tell me in the comments if I've missed a point that you have had in your head, a theory that you think belongs here. If you type it down in the comments, I'll give it a rating from triple S to F. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm like 20 subs away from 13,000. Let's make it happen. Thank you so much for watching. PrimaCon signing out.